Okay, we'll just start. Oh, wait, you ready? Yep. Okay. I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, August 14th, 2024 meeting of the Tenino Planning Commission. Let the record show that all commissioners are present with the exception of Darnella Stenzel. Supposed to be late. Maybe. Possibly show up late. Okay, let's take a look at the agenda. A very heavy agenda here, so.
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Let's take a look at the meeting minutes from July 10th.
I'll move approval of the minutes as presented.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Just double checking that everybody has their mics on.
Yep. Do we have any public comment? No? Okay. No public comment. Now we'll go into reports. Adam, do you have any report from the...
Not since last time.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, unfinished business, comprehensive plan update.
Hello.
You're on.
Thank you. All right, so thank you. Sorry, every time. I do have a presentation. If you will turn your attention to the monitor behind you. We're going to talk about some project updates, including a meeting that we had with Thurston County that might have us changing gears just a little bit. We'll wrap up our discussion on housing capacity and infill, and then we'll turn our attention to the fun stuff, and the title of that section will make a little more sense in a moment. All right, so project updates. TRPC released their final draft housing and land capacity information. They evaluated two alternatives with sub-alternatives beneath those. The primary or the first alternative is the TRPC forecast alternative. So this is their standard forecast. They also evaluated the sustainable Thurston alternative, which is similar to their forecast, except that it allocates no low or moderate income housing in rural Thurston County. It places all of those units into incorporated jurisdiction or their UGAs. Both of these alternatives do account for recent development. They don't consider changes or make any adjustments for market trends, zoning changes, or changes to development regulations since the last forecast was updated. For Tenino, that's not a huge impact, but for other jurisdictions, it could be a little bit more of a significant change in numbers. They also did an estimate for potential accessory dwelling units. They identified about 395 potential ADU lots and forecasted about 19 ADUs for Tenino over our planning horizon, which is pretty similar to what we had estimated as well. The housing capacity numbers that they came up with are here. So for Tenino City and UGA, this table looks a little bit different than what we've previously been looking at, but you can see they've included ADUs mapped at the 0 to 80% AMI, their categorization of the different kinds of units, mid-rise multifamily, low-rise multifamily, moderate density, low density. These track pretty similarly with all of the commerce guidance that we've been talking about previously, but just in an effort to kind of collect all jurisdictions into similar categories. This is how they're presenting information. So we have the capacity numbers here broken out kind of by generalized income bands. And then they did a capacity surplus and deficit calculation, and this is Tenino's specific results. What we're looking at is in all scenarios and sub-scenarios, a very modest deficit in the 0 to 80% AMI and a surplus everywhere else. This is pretty significantly different than the information that we had previously prepared just for planning purposes. We're starting with the same data. They're making some very different assumptions about development capacity and density that could occur on those lots. Overall, this means that we have to do very little in terms of interventions to address the deficit, and we're generally in really good shape. And so based on this information, we had a meeting with Thurston County, and they recommended that we look instead at what Ashley called the fun stuff. Ashley's the planning director there. So given that we don't need to make any sweeping changes to try and address any housing capacity numbers, they suggested that we look at things like downtown plan, economic development opportunities, if we wanted to look at leveraging the success of the ag park and doing some further coordination with either Experience Olympia or Steady, and then revisit our UGA expansion in a year when the joint plans are due to be updated by Thurston County. So they've kind of taken the wind out of my sails in terms of some of the work we've been doing. Not that it's useless work. I think that we've still had some really good conversations, and we were definitely prepared to make some changes to address the capacity numbers. We are no longer in a position where we need to make those changes, although we still certainly could. And I would still advocate for considering those infill development options that we've kind of all come to consensus on, just because they do a lot to expand options for different lifestyles beyond just, income bands. As an aside, Thurston County does support either UGA expansion alternative, either the Mima Acres or the South, and they're very happy to process that, preferably when the joint plan is updated beginning in 2026.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How did they come up with such different numbers?
Yeah.
Like, what is the actual contextual difference that they got to such different numbers?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So they made some very different assumptions based on the carrying capacity of the land, the density. We did a pretty high level analysis because we didn't want to spend too much effort knowing that TRPC was working on a similar process, but we still wanted to get the conversation moving, right? So they did a much finer tuned look at all of the different vacant and redevelopable land in the city and made some different assumptions overall about what could be developed on those properties and to what extent development could occur.
And TRPC is the overarching number that we go with?
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Is it based on the current zoning?
It is based on current zoning and current allowed uses within those zones. That's how they break it down. They may, I'd have to go back into their memo. They may have made some different categorizations in terms of which zoning districts mapped to which income band as well. I will say that TRPC's numbers are, I think, more favorable given the direction of our conversations lately. And I think also probably, I guess, more, I would say they're more realistic based on true development potential, since they were able to do a more detailed analysis of specific properties. I was very surprised that they were so different than the numbers that we came up with, since we all started with the same data.
Okay.
They are, so they are continuing some additional work. At the end of this month, they will have a draft report and some presentation slides available for the planning stakeholders, the planning representatives from each jurisdiction to review, and then those should be finalized in mid-September. Ideally, I will be able to bring more information about exactly what their analysis consisted of and talk through the differences with more specificity at our September meeting.
Okay.
They are hoping that from September to November, each jurisdiction will present this information to planning commissions and city councils for further discussion. And then TRPC will be moving to adopt a preferred housing allocation method. So if you look back, there are 4 different methods listed here within the two each for each scenario. So for a total of 4. So they will select one that would be adopted as kind of the official allocation method. And for Tenino, there aren't hugely dramatic changes, especially when we're looking at the deficits compared to each of the different methods identified here. So worst case scenario, we have a deficit of 41. Best case scenario, we have a deficit of 34 to address. And any of those would be addressed by the infill options that we've been discussing. These numbers do already include the consideration for ADUs. So that's where we're at. One other item that I do want to point out for future TRPC work is next spring 2025, they are planning to begin updating countywide planning policies. Countywide planning policies are policies adopted by the county that apply both to the county and to all of the incorporated jurisdictions, and our plan needs to be consistent with those policies. Normally, I would expect to start our planning process with updated countywide planning policies, not try and like revise the work that we've already done. So these are coming fairly late in the game, but we will in spring to summer 2025 be taking a look at the updated CPPs and determining if we need to make any revisions to work that we are going to be completing this fall and winter. Questions?
So we all kind of agreed that we would allow for different housing types in the different zones outright, but even without that, we wouldn't actually need to do that. I mean, I'm not saying I don't want to. I'm just wondering. We already kind of meet our numbers without doing that.
We are showing a very modest deficit. We would need to make some kind of small intervention. We talked about some different opportunity sites if we made the zoning change that we talked about to rezone a portion of the property up there off of Lincoln to multifamily. That would take care of that deficit. I do still think that there is a lot of value in considering infill options, but if that's something that's no longer palatable, then we could put that as an action item to reconsider in the future.
Okay. So I guess we'll talk about that next month.
We can talk about it a little bit today. So I'm gonna now transition to the housing capacity and infill development piece that I brought. So ADUs, not much has really changed here. Tenino's still gonna have to allow up to 2 ADUs per conforming residential lot that allows for single family development. You get to take credit for that increased capacity. TRPC is forecasting 19 units by 2045, so that helps close the gap on that deficit, bringing the total deficit to just 19 instead of, just 41 instead of 60.
Oh, I see.
Yes. We did talk about infill options the last couple of meetings. Those infill options that we considered were middle housing types that we might allow by right in different portions of the city. Many of these are in fact, most of these are already allowed somewhere in Tenino, the big exception being cottage Yes, cottage courtyard apartments. So that's this courtyard building in the center right column. That's that kind of like 2 to 3 story walk up with a central landscaped courtyard, kind of U-shaped building. Anyway, so by and large, Tenino already accepts many of these in some zones. So we talked about, and this is what that looks like, we talked about allowing them by right a little more broadly, something more like this, where we allow ADUs per state law. We look at expanding the by right or even potentially administrative use permit allowances for some of these kinds of units in different zones.
So allowing these types by right, does that alone solve that gap that we were talking about?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, more than. This would increase the capacity beyond that deficit.
Okay.
So would we even need to do the UGA stuff in a year? If we do that?
You wouldn't necessarily need to do that. However, the county still supports it, knowing that there's kind of not much room for future growth. It's something that could be deferred to when that growth is a little more pressing, or that need is a little more pressing. The parks folks do still want a UGA amendment to bring that recently acquired property in, so it makes sense to kind of do everything at once.
Sure.
And even if you amend your UGA to bring in Mima Acres, that doesn't mean it needs to be annexed anytime in the near future. You're just preparing for the eventuality.
I will say I'm still very much in favor of this. I think it's just creating both economic opportunities but also more housing opportunities. I think one of the big things is if we can get people to move here, it brings more money here and brings more opportunities for economic development.
I think that middle housing types for places that don't need to worry just about making the income band math work, I still think that middle housing provides a lot of options for people with a lot of different lifestyles and is still a valuable piece to keep considering. People want to be able to be a first-time home buyer. People want to be able to downsize and continue to live in the community where they've got all their social ties.
Sure.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. I think it's also important to allow the kids who are graduating or graduating college and want to move back to where they grew up to be able to afford to do so.
Definitely. And there are people that are, busy professionals. Maybe they don't want a big detached single family house with a big detached yard that they have to maintain. Maybe they want just a little townhouse that has an HOA that takes care of the yard. There are as many lifestyles as there are humans. And so having a range of options available just helps support that diversity. So I'd still definitely advocate for this.
I'm not against it. I'm just trying to make it
I mean, the question's worthwhile.
clarifiable
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. So we're no longer in a position where we have to consider something like this, but we are in a position where we can consider something like this as a way to benefit the community, both now and potential future residents. Okay. If we do continue to consider the infill options that we've discussed, that would also address that low-income housing deficit, more than address that, through allowing multiplexes in the C3 zone, allowing courtyard apartments in that C3 zone, that allowance for ADUs that's required. Other infill options are more likely to serve kind of the higher end of the low-income brackets or the moderate income bracket, but still valuable because, as we discussed, it serves a greater range of lifestyles. It allows a little bit more flexibility for properties that have really unique physical characteristics or environmental constraints. So The next thing that I wanted to talk about related to land use is our future land use map. So we've done a lot of discussion so far, and I am recommending some changes to the future land use map to bring it, and I have this copy for everybody as well, to bring it into conformance with kind of how things have gone lately. Do folks in the audience want a printed copy of this as well? I have some extras. And then I'm so sorry to ask you to come up a second time. I also have printed copies of the zoning map because we'll talk a little bit about the differences between the land use and zoning maps. Okay, so what we're looking at on the screen and in your hands is the future land use map. This is one of the figures in the land use element. And we have some recommended changes and some items to discuss to get your input on related to updating this map. So there are some changes that I'm recommending just to kind of bring it into conformance with the zoning map. The first piece is there is a set of properties on Lincoln that is currently designated multifamily residential, and I am recommending that we redesignate those to be multifamily also on the future land use map.
What are they?
I should have numbered these. So that's this one here, this set of properties that says designate MF right here
Oh,
on Lincoln.
the one without the question mark?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. The one just to the east of that, which does have the question mark, that is one of the opportunity sites that we discussed. If we wanted to designate that multifamily, I would suggest just continuing the multifamily designation from the other 2 blocks to the west, and capturing the 5 lots in the middle and just making that a continuous multifamily band.
So that includes those 2 houses that are, is there 2 over there? Sort of derelict houses that are over there? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so let's see if this works. This, I would say this area, does that? Okay, kind of works. So this area is already zoned multifamily, so reinforcing the future land use designation is a recommendation. If we choose to redesignate this multifamily as well, which we talked about last time, then I would recommend capturing it.
I see.
And then do we need to go through the rezoning process to make those all multifamily residential?
We don't need to rezone them at this time. The way that the future land use designations are written, it allows for a pretty broad range of uses. It's really flexible, but it would support future rezoning if those property owners wanted to make a change.
Gotcha. I'm so sorry. Can we go back just a second?
Yeah.
What is the purpose of this map?
This is essentially your policy that says this is what we want the city to generally look like in 20 years.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
thank you.
this map sets the future kinds of land uses. It doesn't say this is specifically going to develop as a townhouse project. This one's specifically going to develop as 3 single-family homes or anything like that. But it sets a general idea of the kinds of uses that you want to see in different portions of
So
the
we're
city.
not changing the zoning, but we're saying in the future we might change the zoning.
Yes.
I see.
And now, if we don't capture these as multifamily, then in the future, can they not become multifamily?
You would need to amend this map in the future. You're supposed to amend this map in the future to support that kind of rezone.
Gotcha.
obviously there are places within the city where the future land use map was not amended, but the zoning was amended at some point, and that's kind of one of the, why I'm recommending some of these corrective actions.
Gotcha.
One of the reasons why I am proposing that we connect those two multifamily pieces is because rezoning small portions of property can be considered a spot zone, which is not legal under state law. And so creating the opportunity for a larger zone is better.
Gotcha.
The next place where we have some corrective action is this little guy. I'm not sure if this was just maybe an error in the data, but there's just a single lot here that is left designated as just single-family residential that looks like it should be designated commercial when we're looking at the zoning map. So that's this little guy here.
Is it zoned single family now?
No, it's zoned C3.
Oh, it's just on this future map.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. So
Yeah.
it's just like a ran out of ink kind of situation.
I don't know if it's just like a mistake was made or if it was left out intentionally. It was, 8 years ago, so I can't
Sure.
really say for sure, but I would recommend that we just fix that now.
It's just cleanup done.
Makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yep. Here's the parks properties, just identifying this as a future area for UGA expansion. Not, we're not showing the boundary change. We would just be showing it as a place we would like to make a boundary change when the time comes with Thurston County. Same with Mima Acres down here. And then I've got a few things to discuss. So these pieces on the future land use map are shown as industrial.
Isn't the one boot-shaped one? Isn't that the quarry?
This is,
I think it's a
Okay.
rock quarry where.
it's zoned SFES.
Oh.
Oh.
So
Interesting.
I'm trying to figure out, do we designate this as residential, acknowledging that we have that zoning? Or should we maybe consider amending the zoning map to make it industrial?
That's the quarry, right?
I think so.
I'm pretty sure that's the quarry at the end of the street.
Okay, so maybe that should be industrial, or maybe we
I would
do
think
wanna leave
that-
it as like a future land use of residential and just know that for the time being, it's, this is why we're discussing
It's a
this.
good question.
Yep.
I would think it would be industrial because it's just like rock, exposed rock, but I don't know.
So that's shown as industrial. This little piece also is shown as industrial in future land use map. It's zone residential.
I see.
Do we
Yeah.
want to consider updating the zoning map in any way to change the zoning on these parcels?
I mean, there was some interest, I don't know if it's been dropped in making that industrial in the past, but
That's right on the other side of the trestle.
yeah, right along
Yeah.
the tracks there.
Yeah.
They were talking about doing a distillery there, but we found out last time that maybe they kind of stopped thinking about it. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I don't know where it is right now.
Okay. So it doesn't need to happen tonight, but we should firm up a preferred direction on these, whether that's leave it as it is or amend one map or the other. And then the last piece to discuss is, we had talked about making some changes to Tenino Estates, for example, maybe making this like a mixed use designation. This would be the time to really formalize our preferred direction on that as well. We also have the option to just leave it as it is. I will say the mixed use designation is extremely flexible. The way that it's described in the comp plan is pretty much like try to mix uses, but anything could be appropriate there, which is also fairly consistent with how the C3 zone is written as an implementing tool. So it could provide for some flexibility in the future. Or we can leave it as is. It does have a commercial designation on the west side that is a little bit inconsistent with the multifamily zoning on those same properties. So regardless, we might want to consider taking some corrective action there as well.
It doesn't make sense to me that those front pieces along 99, it doesn't make sense that those are C2.
Is that what they
These are no,
Yeah.
so
Right?
the-
They're C2?
The future land uses
They're multifamily.
and the zoning districts
Oh,
are not
sorry.
necessarily the same. Yeah, so they're designated in
Looking
the
at the wrong
future
map.
land use map as some kind of commercial.
Yeah.
Where I know the colors are a little
All
bit.
of them are, or just the first two?
Just the first
First
three.
few
There are,
ones, yeah.
there are 4 that are mapped as, or designated as, commercial.
Yeah.
This pink color is mixed use and it's very similar to the pink color that's used for C3, so
Yeah.
I totally get why that's a little bit confusing.
I got mixed up on the wrong map, I think.
Yeah. Well,
So
we're
it's a
talking
little confusing.
designations.
A couple different maps and
A little
colors going
I
on.
know, I know. I'm sorry, this is.
I think mixed use seems fine for those first 4 lots.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't
we
know if
had
the
also-
whole thing should be mixed use or not, but.
Yeah, we had at one point talked about, well, what if we designated this, this entire like square as mixed use, for potential future development if ever Tenino Estates were to redevelop. We can abandon that idea, or we can potentially run with it, or we can just maybe make some adjustments to make those mixed use, just the 4.
I feel like whatever we do, I feel like it should apply to the whole square since it's all the same like area. But I also understand that the road touching parcels would make the most sense to make the mixed use.
I mean, I don't see why not include all 8 of those
Yeah.
front parcels as mixed use,
Yeah,
and
sure,
then
mixed
the
use.
rest of it multifamily, in my
Yeah.
opinion. But
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I think that makes sense.
And then we'll also be adding some of that anti-displacement policy language that we discussed last time with an emphasis on like coordinating with an affordable housing developer in the event that an affordable.
That
housing
sounds
facility
fine, but we're not changing the zoning to multifamily.
We're not
talking
changing,
about that,
we're
right?
not proposing.
Because we don't have to do
zoning
that
changes yet.
anymore anyway
We're-
to meet our,
We're
or
not.
we never did, but.
I mean, no, we never really had to, but
Yeah.
we're not, we're, right now, we're talking about what would the city, assuming we follow the plan, what would the city look like in 20 years' time?
Right.
And the mixed use would allow for either continue as is with residential manufactured home park, or if it redeveloped, could redevelop with some kind of mix of commercial and residential uses.
I have one more question. In regards to the UGAs,
Okay.
what if they don't shape out the way or something additional comes? So like the forest next to the park, what if hypothetically that comes available and the city is able to buy it? How does that UGA expansion exist if it's not in the future land use?
You can still amend, so this map can be amended, right? So you could always add it, and you can still amend the UGA. When we talk about these areas, being added to this map, these would be identified as potential future UGA expansion areas. And I've got some draft policy language that talks about coordinating with Thurston County to finalize UGA expansions
Okay.
during joint planning efforts. So even showing them now, when it became time to actually do the UGA amendment, that's gonna require a comp plan update anyway, and you would amend this map again at that time.
Gotcha.
So this map, I mean, It's good to have a future plan map, but it doesn't mean that much,
It's-
really, but.
I mean, it is a policy document and you can only change it once a year. So it's not like we can change it again, like, let's say we adopt this plan in, December 1st and we can't change it again, like, December 2nd or anything like that, right? Like, we've gotta wait.
Until January.
Gotta wait till January, but then if you
Let it expire.
adopt it, then you can't change it for the rest of 2025.
Right.
You get one shot
Got
every
ya.
calendar year to make an adjustment.
Okay.
So,
And if it's not on this map, it can't be rezoned that way.
you should have, all of your rezones should be consistent with your comprehensive plan and your future land use map.
Gotcha. So it's not a complete deal breaker is what I'm hearing, but it's a very not suggested path.
I would
Frowned
say it
upon.
depends on who your decision maker is, whether that would fly.
Gotcha.
For example, if a hearing examiner decides your rezones, typically just looking at findings of fact and conclusions of law, they probably wouldn't support something that's directly inconsistent with the future land use map. They would expect to see a future land use map amendment alongside that zoning map amendment.
Gotcha. Sounds good then.
Okay. What about West Tenino? The master plan community, do we leave that
You're,
as it is, or?
what an incredible segue, my friend.
Yes.
So, I wanted to talk about West Tenino. We've talked about West Tenino a little bit. The way it's currently described in the land use element is that it's still the goal and policy language still considers the potential for higher intensity uses in the prairie portion of West Tenino. And also a mix of residential units and densities on Lemon Hill. My questions are, the residential uses on the hillside seem like they're fairly consistent with what we've discussed previously, but we should be thinking about lower intensity uses in the flat area, or really just leaving it as we expect this to remain in some kind of agricultural use. Or related, or adding some policy language that says we could consider these higher intensity uses to the extent that they wouldn't impact habitat for protected species.
So should we leave it as master plan community and it doesn't make any difference that?
We can leave it as master plan community. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. We could just rename that designation West Tenino and leave it retitled, but otherwise the description would remain largely the same. Let me see if I can pull up the description
So,
really quick.
when it was originally conceived, I think they wanted to have somebody come in with a plan to develop all of the Brown area, basically all at once, one master plan. But now that there's the horse facility out there, and could you develop any one of these parcels, I guess, is what I'm wondering, if you had a plan for that specific area?
So what the current land use designation says is, let me turn off my tracked changes here. The current land use designation says the master plan community designation applies to approximately 264 acres in West Tenino that are currently used for agricultural purposes. This area has limited development potential due to the presence of Mazama pocket gophers, a protected species, and other constraints. Potential future development could include a range of industrial, commercial, and residential uses, and a master plan is required. Any master plan for the site should include the following: a mix of commercial, industrial, office, and residential development on the flat portion of the site, provided such development, this is my revision. I should be showing the original. A mix of commercial, industrial, office, and residential development on the flat portion of the site, a mix of residential types and densities on Lemon Hill, parks and or other amenities to protect and showcase the unique natural features on the site, such as prairie habitat, scenic views from Lemon Hill, and trails that follow the course of hillside ravines, a connector to the Yelm Tenino Trail. A master plan may also include a walkable commercial area, a secondary access road. So theoretically, with a master plan, any of these parcels could independently be developed. They would still need to meet all of the adopted development standards at that
You just
time.
read.
No, in the zoning code.
Oh.
I mean, you would need to do a master plan meeting these general requirements, but you would also need to demonstrate how that master plan conforms to the adopted development standards.
But it talks about acreage and stuff. Is there a way to unlink the parcels in a way that still require the same level of, you can do that?
Yeah, so it, the MPC designation applies to 264 acres,
Oh, I
but
see.
just like the.
But you don't have to have it that large of a plan.
Right,
I
yeah,
see,
you
yes.
could have a master plan for any one of those properties. Ideally, the whole thing would have been developed as a single thing, but best laid plans and all.
Sure. Things happen.
Things happen, gophers pop up, I don't know. Butterflies too, there's a reference to, what is it, a spotted butterfly?
The checkered butterfly?
Yes, checker spot butterfly, Taylor's checker spot butterfly. So we could make some changes. We could strike the name master plan community and just name it West Tenino. We could make some changes to the potential uses on the site, or we could just consider saying a mix of these uses might be appropriate, provided they don't impact any habitat.
I know a lot of these properties that aren't owned by the people who own the horse area is owned by DFW now for their own
Some of it is, yeah.
habitat conservation, and then on the further west side is owned by Thurston County for their habitat conservation program.
Not
So-
the, are you talking, oh jeez, I'm even looking at the right thing. So are you?
It might be right outside of the.
I think
I was
the
gonna say-
wildlife area is not in the city limits.
Is it not?
I don't believe so.
Oh,
No, the previous owner owned more land than what was annexed.
Yeah, I'll double check the ownership for all of those properties. If any of them are owned by a public entity, then it might make more sense to check in with that entity and see if we should designate it as like public, semi-public. But I don't think there's anything wrong with leaving it as it is.
I mean, it sounds like it would be work kind of for nothing to do anything with it, sort of, right?
Yeah, I mean, for the purposes of like setting policy and trying to be accurate in how things are described, I see some value in updating the name from master plan community to something different that
Mhm.
still would require a master plan in the
Right.
event that it developed.
yeah.
But knowing how difficult it would be to develop this as any kind of like self-contained mixed-use community with any
Yeah.
real intensity, like.
As it was originally conceived.
Right.
Pretty hard to see that happening.
Yeah, unless something really dramatic changes with the federally listed species, which we can't plan on that.
All right.
Is your question whether or not we change the name to West Tenino? Or is that like a later discussion?
We can, I was just making a note to change the name to West Tenino
Okay.
now, so happy to make that change. Okay, so let me head back to the rest of my presentation. Alright, so getting back to Will's excellent transition, my perfect segue. So I think it sounds like we have kind of confirmed the vision for what's going on in West Tenino. I will make that change to the future land use designation title, and I've got some minor recommended changes to how that designation is written. The other two pieces that I would like to introduce for discussion are downtown and taking advantage of any regional opportunities. So your land use element includes a plan for downtown Tenino. The overall goals for that downtown plan are these three things here: get more people in downtown, enhance the quality of place in downtown, and anticipate future parking issues. There's also a note that attracting, retaining, and expanding businesses is probably important, but there's not really a lot more information about that. It's really focused on kind of the sense of place in downtown. I do think that it's probably more appropriate to talk business stuff with economic development versus land use, but just in terms of how this fits into the land use element, and if we think that these goals are appropriate within the land use element, that's kind of what I'm hoping to touch on tonight. So I don't know what everyone's maybe I'll ask, what are everyone's initial thoughts about these three goals relative to downtown Tenino?
Hard to argue against them.
Yeah.
Do you think that they go far enough, or would you aspire for a little bit more?
Does quality of place have a definition?
Quality of place is like the quality of the pedestrian environment, so having like nice sidewalks, street furnishings, street trees, quality road crossings,
Okay.
that kind of thing. I mean, ideally also full storefronts with inviting displays and that kind of thing, but it gets a lot harder to regulate kind of what the individual property owner does
Yeah.
with their specific business.
Yeah.
I will say get more people in downtown sounds great, but what does that even mean, look like how from a planning perspective do we do that?
So within the current element, the goals are kind of fleshed out as provide some additional housing downtown. So like more people living in downtown means more people will probably be walking around downtown. Consider ways to increase mixed use development so you can get some additional businesses in. Draw
That's kind
people.
of where the C3 zone
Yeah.
originally was born, I think. from this stuff.
Probably, yeah. Draw people into downtown with more events.
What about some of the traffic calming features and that kind of thing? We have like this Main Street Tenino plan somewhere that talks about bump outs, planted trees, roundabouts, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Kind of stuck in the fact that it's a state highway, and so we got to deal with the state and talk about grinding down the crown of the road through downtown and that sort of thing, which is probably pretty expensive, I assume. But that's where it kind of hit a roadblock. But just making it more pedestrian friendly, that's something.
Yeah.
To this, right?
Yeah, so dealing with what is in the pedestrian realm is typically going to be a little bit easier, and what your plan envisions now is giving people more places to sit, walk, and enjoy downtown, and connecting downtown to the city park, and that is envisioned along Olympia Avenue, providing more street trees and like a really strong visual connection from
This is why the
downtown.
farmers market moved to Olympia Street. We got those bollards next to the old bank so that they could play into it.
Yeah, so we could continue to develop that connector. It's possible that we could plan for something like a festival street that has a little bit different treatment, that is like visually more exciting, as a way to continue that connection. depending on how those are done, those can also be a fairly low-cost intervention with like painted street art, although the maintenance on that is, it's not gonna last through an entire winter or anything. There's also a concept about developing a bike system that leads people through downtown. I think both the pedestrian and bike system are gonna be things that we discuss in more detail when we talk about the transportation element. There are some relatively new state requirements about active transportation and multimodal level of service. So essentially, like, how do you start thinking about traffic throughput beyond a car, but considering other modes as well? Those are all of the specific ideas related to getting more people in downtown.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know that all of these are maybe appropriate for inclusion in the land use element. Like, this seems almost like it would be a sub-area plan. But we can certainly leave it here, just for simplicity's sake. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it, with doing that.
I would be in favor of something being added to talk about businesses, because I think downtown without businesses is like not downtown.
Okay. Would thinking about business development kind of generally, the plan definitely frames downtown Tenino as kind of the primary business hub. Doesn't really, I think, understandably address like the ag park or potential to jump on that momentum. And I'm curious what everyone's thoughts are on how we might consider balancing economic development opportunities in those two different places. I think that they can be complementary, but I also, there's only so much effort that can go around, right? So, just
what kinds of things could we do to the ag park, do you think, I mean, it is by definition like a business area, and I don't know, it's being managed by the EDC, right?
Yeah, and not that you would necessarily do anything to it, but just in terms of, like, would you prefer to put a little more emphasis on capturing tourism and tourism related dollars and start thinking about land use in terms of like tourism supportive decisions, or still prefer to really only focus on downtown, or like where would you strike the balance between that? And I ask that because I got one question forwarded to me about like, hey, could we get, what could we do to get like a hotel? We've got this kind of countywide emphasis on agritourism, ecotourism, and it would be cool to maybe take advantage of some of that and bring some additional dollars into Tenino. Getting a hotel downtown with the height restriction that you currently have is going to be really challenging, but thinking about whether there is a place downtown where a hotel would fit, and could we craft some limited exemptions to height to support something like that in that instance, like just kind of as an example of where do we set the policy and how does that tier down into actual implementation.
I think if we were going to get a hotel, it'd be more of like a boutique hotel or something, probably on a smaller scale than what you would see out at the I-5 in Grand Mountain, which is where I would expect a big hotel to go. I mean, basically, just if I was going to develop a hotel, that's probably where I would want it to be, most likely. But
like a chain hotel, absolutely.
Yeah.
I do think that a little boutique hotel would fit better here. Something that feels like, I don't know, I guess the kind of the regional example is like a small McMenamins or something like that. But those are still, they still typically need a certain number of rooms to pencil.
Mm.
And they're still gonna have some challenges fitting into a 35-foot height limit.
McMinimans usually buys a building.
Yeah, they're adaptive reuse, yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure what you guys think. I'm not against a hotel, but
Yeah.
I do think if a hotel was going to go in and it was going to be brand new construction, pushing it out toward the ag park would probably make more sense than trying to shove it right downtown in amongst all of the other buildings that are here.
and with
Especially if you want to keep the nature of downtown as it is and not create something that's going to look completely out of place in the community. So yeah, anything, if it was going to be something big and brand new, like a large chain hotel, I think out by the ag park would be a better solution.
There's not that much land out by the ag park that could be developed as a hotel.
Right. And so that's the other thing that you kind of have to struggle with here. Is
Yeah.
like, okay, so.
I mean, I
It's
do,
really
I do
not
think
that
that we could consider, like, if we were considering a hotel or other tourism supported uses, right? Like, there are tour guides, there are outfitters, there are a lot of different kinds of businesses that support tourism beyond just a hotel.
Sure.
But, you know, if we do wanna consider looking at some of those uses and where they might be located, we can definitely do that. Right now, that's just not contemplated in the current plan. And I don't wanna get too far into the weeds on like where in Tenino should we put a hotel, but just kind of like thinking about how we're prioritizing economic development for downtown versus other places.
Mm-hmm.
How do we wanna address that? And how does that impact our land use planning?
I think in the conversation of heights, we all know where most people feel.
Yeah.
And I think in the city of Tenino, the only places that you could potentially feel comfortable is the two mixed uses, the one right off of Garfield up towards the top, because it's not really going to obstruct most views, or somewhere over by the egg park. But the egg park again does not have much open space over there unless it's in my acres, and well, that's a whole new battle that's not worth going down.
Yeah, that would be a much longer term project for sure.
or it's not in the UGA or in the city, but the Miles Sand and Gravel property right next to the ag park along the road. I mean,
Yeah,
we
When
could,
the-
since we're doing future land use, if that's what we're still talking about.
definitely. And Dan and I have talked about that property a lot. I think they're still actively producing aggregate, but when they're done being a quarry, it would make a lot of sense to capture that and do a master plan community designation or something to that effect out there.
Is that something worth STJ connecting with them and saying, what is your
Yeah.
5 to 15 year plan, and how can we as the city help kind of prepare for that?
You know, I think so. I think Dan spoke with them before I started working with Tenino, but it's been some time, and I don't know exactly what their recent production has looked like or what their reserves look like anymore. So I'll make a note.
Yeah, I've heard rumors, but I don't know about what they want to do, but all different types of things that who knows
Yeah.
what's real.
Yeah. Well, and if they're like, yeah, we want to build a community around the quarry and make it a man-made lake afterwards, like, we should want to support that, and that can be something we discuss. But if they're also like, yeah, no, we're gonna keep mining forever, then we don't need to plan for it, you know?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah. Dan was definitely under the impression that they don't have that many years of productivity left. But he and I both recommend leaving the administration of permitting and
Oh, absolutely.
reclamation to the county.
Yeah.
for now, and when they're done,
Right.
taking them on.
Makes sense.
Smart.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll make a note to check in with Miles Sand and Gravel, and just kind of get a sense of how they might fit into our overall planning timeline or planning horizon, based on their productivity timeline. Okay. The other regional opportunities that are mentioned kind of in the Experience Olympia material are really thinking about regional parks. Like I, for example, got an email from a parenting listserv that I'm on that was really excited about the Quarry Pool reopening. And you know, that's a regional draw for the South Sound, and is there something more that can be done to leverage the interest in that kind of amenity? Because it's really a cool piece of the city.
Yeah.
And then also the Creative District. I don't know if you guys, like how familiar you are with creative districts, but you know, they're a really cool, like formal designation with the state and leveraging.
We have one, don't we?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying, is like you have one of these, and they're really neat. And the idea behind a creative district is that you're able to use art to leverage some economic development. And could we think a little bit more broadly about that, as we're kind of considering capturing any kind of tourism related economic development, and start building in some land use assumptions related to services and whatnot that would support.
Would be, I mean, if people are coming down to use the pool, then try and get them to use the other stuff in the community as well. Would be good. So bike trails out to the ag park perhaps would be pretty nice, or some of the stuff in that plan about bike trails through town, you know, trying to encourage people to come downtown from the park through Olympia Street.
Yeah.
It's kind of what we have right now, I suppose. But
Yeah, and I think this will probably go into like the transportation element a little bit potentially, but like Will just said, I think it would be really neat as the ag park develops to have it all connected. So like working either with the county or ourselves to do a trail from the park to the ag park would allow that connection and allow people to actually walk it and not need to drive the whole thing. And obviously there's the trestle in the middle of it, so it's kind of gonna be trouble no matter how we do it. But I would also, I came to Oregon Trail Days a couple weeks ago, and walking down through the farmers market to the actual park, there's no actual crosswalks. So like in the middle of town there's a couple crosswalks. I think one of them is like you push a button and it lights up and traffic stops, maybe. But over here I was like, it's almost a blind corner for pedestrians, and then you have to cross the street with all of these cars, making it more of a blind corner. So like to make this city more friendly for business, friendly for tourism, like we need to make sure that it's friendly for the everyday pedestrian.
Yeah. Yes.
we are missing some crosswalks. It's
Yeah.
true.
But I think crosswalks
We can't
are
walk
the
to
easy thing.
the grocery store from my house
No.
through a crosswalk.
Yeah. Well, and like Will said earlier, and it will go in the transportation, but like the fact that forever there's been discussions on and off forever about a roundabout at, what is that intersection? By Dave's.
Yeah, 99.
Yeah. Like that would also make traffic flow easier and slow people down a little bit and make everything easier for the everyday person as well as the person coming through town.
Yeah. My transportation guy has an awesome slide called "What's So Great About Roundabouts," and I will make sure he brings that when we talk to him.
The other place we had planned a roundabout at the same time was by the auto parts store.
Oh, yeah.
So one on like either end downtown.
Yeah, the auto parts store area is interesting because it's like 3 different levels of road. So I think that also is probably a hindrance to a roundabout. But
There's probably some weird stuff under the asphalt.
So that brings me to the end of my presentation for tonight. I think I've got some notes to make some updates. I will have a track changes version of the land use element for next month, so that we can really dig into our policy work. I would love to give you guys some homework to think about the question marks on the future land use map and be prepared to come to a consensus next time on kind of how we want to deal with that strip of properties along Lincoln, and what to do with the pieces that are designated industrial. I feel like we generally have kind of a sense of what to do with industrial, but I'd like to firm that up next time.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
that's all I got.
thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Sorry, I did promise that I had enough for a short meeting, but I still took an hour.
It's all right.
Shorter than some, so.
Okay, new business. We have a planning commissioner application to review. Matthew
Exciting.
Moriarty.
Oh my gosh, you can't have my name.
No, it's not here.
Oh,
He's not here. Oh, I wasn't sure. Okay.
He does not know his favorite date tonight.
well,
Well-
my only objection after reading this whole thing is
I was gonna grill him. Now
Is,
I got nothing.
I was also gonna go.
Yeah, go right ahead.
My only objection is that he has the same name as me, so
That will be confusing, I agree.
yeah.
Well, I don't know. We can't review too much on this
Yeah.
application. So.
I was gonna say the application.
I was
isn't-
gonna say, do you think we should rewrite the application with some more interesting questions? I feel
would-
like you can answer these so easily
Well, and that's
with
what
the
I.
most minimal amount of information. Then, like, what are we supposed to say about it? You know?
Yeah. Well, that was my first thing reading it. I was like, I don't know why you even want to be a planning commissioner.
Yeah. Why do you want to be a planning? What are your
Yeah.
What do you think the big issues facing Tenino are? Or, like,
Yeah.
is there one thing you'd like to change? I came up with a bunch of them, but I, mean,
Yeah.
I was gonna ask him. He's not here. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to see them at least add one, like, explanation question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something that we can do with this that would be a little bit cooler than
And like,
what we got.
list
Yes,
any
it's
applicable. It says list any applicable experience working with budgets.
My own person.
You're like,
It's hilarious. But I've seen that answer before, so it's
Yeah.
not like that uncommon.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, you know, what else are people gonna answer most of the time, right?
Yeah, but we don't
There's
work with
fewer.
budgets
Yeah.
either, so what difference does
Yeah.
it make? I mean,
yeah, that's the
It's
weird
not
part
really
about it.
a question.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Brainstorm, send questions to Courtney maybe,
Yeah.
or send new questions.
Yeah.
Actually, that probably has to be a city council thing, doesn't it?
I don't know.
The
Hey,
city
Courtney,
council approves him.
Can we ask you a question?
Yes.
The application, can we recommend edits?
Can we change this application?
Yeah, I
Good.
think so.
Like, ask people different questions.
You're asking me to change the application, I think so.
Okay.
Make it better for us.
Yeah.
I would recommend emailing me your changes.
Okay, that
That'll be
sounds
a lot
good.
easier to track.
Yeah,
Cool.
we just really want to have like a why do you want to be on the planning commission, or
Yeah.
like what did you say, like what are some issues that you think
Yeah, what
tonight
do
is
you think the
facing?
biggest issues facing Tenino are? What's
Yeah.
one thing you would change? I don't know, a lot of stuff that might tell you something about why they want to
Yeah,
be on the commission.
yeah. Well, that'll help
Maybe
us
they just
review
hate
it.
the sidewalk in front of their house, and that's the only reason. I don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, but it would be nice to know.
There are
Yeah.
worse reasons.
Yeah.
There are worse reasons. All right.
Yep.
Cool. I don't have any objections either.
Yeah.
So, What are we supposed to do in this, with this application? We're supposed to say,
So you guys can decide if you want to prolong to see if any other applications will come in, because I know there was rumor of one other one that I was supposed to be receiving.
That's the rumor that I,
So we
was
can hold
circulating.
off and make a decision at the next meeting, or.
could we invite him to come in as well? Or,
Yeah, if you'd like to meet him, we can invite him to the next meeting.
I feel like that would, at least that would supplement the application, which doesn't
Yeah, you
give
can
a
ask
lot of
some questions, 'cause that's
information.
kinda what we did with those two too.
Yeah.
So we had them come in and y'all kind of probe them.
Yeah, feels good. Scare him off.
It's a volunteer
Just kidding,
job.
but anyway, I think that's nice to supplement the application at least, or.
Yeah. Does that need a formal action or no?
I don't think so.
All right.
Good deal.
If that's the case, I guess
Public comment number 2.
I forgot that's the thing.
there's another public comment period. I forgot that we added that. Anybody want to make a comment? Yes?
He doesn't count as public.
Yes, please. Say your name and I guess your address, right?
Yeah. And push the button on the microphone so it lights up green.
It's green.
Okay.
There you go.
My name's Mark Wojcicki. I'm a volunteer and a board member for the Tenino Community Service Center, or we call it Food Bank. I live in the county. Do you want my address? I live up by off the lake.
Okay, that's.
You know, I can give you my address. Okay. And then I'm here with. Go ahead.
Sure. I am the executive director of Tenino Community Service.
Okay.
I live in the city.
Sounds good.
We're here, we were encouraged to come here by Mayor Watterson to start working with you guys for two main reasons. One is to request a land use and zoning change on our warehouse lot. It's actually the city lot that we have a lease for where we store our food.
The metal building on the corner,
Correct.
the dog leg there.
Correct. The Sussex and Wickman
Yes.
Road. I think you referred to the Auto Parts area.
Yes,
Roundabout.
opposite the auto
Yeah.
parts store. Yes.
Right now, that is designated, land use, residential and zoning residential. What's tricky about that is that's not used for the site currently, and then it doesn't match our lot up on Sussex where we distribute food on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That is designated, looks like commercial, which I think is C3.
Okay.
And so we're just trying to understand what the process is to request, or if there's a form.
What were you looking at for the actual food bank property? Do you want that? What's wrong with? That's fine.
Where we
Just the,
it's
warehouse.
Just changing from residential to match it, I guess it would be C3 or commercial. Whatever you guys determine.
Why?
That's the
I
first-
wonder why that isn't public, semi-public now. That's a city-owned building, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
And then we have a lease with the city.
Yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense for it to be
Oh,
residential.
that's weird. I didn't really know
Well,
that.
I'm surprised at that. So the reason this came up is we have a state grant from the Department of Commerce to work with the EDC to do a strategic plan for the distribution of the warehouse because we're exploding. The amount of poundage of food coming through our facility has gone up 70% from last year.
Wow.
We're serving the whole South County. We're not the same as Thurston County Food Bank. We're separate. So we're serving Rainier, Tenino, Dakota. We get Grand Mountain and Rochester residents. We're even getting people from North Lewis County coming up to get food. It's crazy. And so we're working with them to figure out if we could use the site where the warehouse is, the city property differently. Change the orientation, maybe expand it to store more food.
So
that's one.
Make the building larger, is that what you're saying? Or possibly? Okay.
Yeah, totally.
And then
so,
have people come there and pick up food there also?
Well, not right now. It'd still be right down here, but that would be part of the strategic planning process. Maybe
Okay.
consolidate. I don't know.
And you can't do, the city's told you can't do any tenant improvements or anything? Or-
No, we can do. Go ahead, Jody. You come on, Jody. She's the brains. I'm the volunteer.
We can't really do anything on that corner until we have, proper zoning. We have been able to, garner some nice grants, and I'd like to because WSDA is really behind us to make sure that we are providing, services. And we are multi-agency now. We provide a lot of different, services to the communities between Dakota and the senior center in Rainier. They all fall under our umbrella.
Right.
So we are serving upwards of 6,000 mouths we're feeding a month. We're feeding up to 30 kids a day in Dakota, lunches, until they can go back to school. We are the only hub at the moment that has flu and COVID tests in a kiosk in the county. So we're having a lot of people within the county coming to our facility to get services, whether it's food, whether it's veteran services, whether it's the COVID tests or flu tests. It also has the FERC test in there, so you can take the test, throw it in there, somebody comes and gets it, takes it to the lab. We just do so many different things. If there's a flood in Dakota, we load everything up that we need to load up, so that there's diapers, there's wipes, there's formula, there's food for them to eat, readily to eat, or for us to be able to help them cook it. Just sleeping bags, sleeping mats, everything. So we are just busting at the seams.
Yeah.
We don't have any more room.
Christina, why is that not zoned public, semi-public now? If it's the city-owned building, shouldn't it be? Or not necessarily?
I mean, it's possible that it just didn't get caught the last time there were zoning changes made, or
I think
we
it's
didn't
been a city
understand the.
building for 70 years. Was a greater storage shed or something before that, I think, before it is
Yeah.
it's current.
For some really bizarre reason, it got changed in the mix of some things about 2014 maybe,
Oh.
Interesting.
and that's just a number, that it got changed in about that way, but nobody can tell me why.
Yeah.
Can I make a
So-
suggestion?
Must have been a mistake, I'm only
So
guessing.
it was either a mistake or somebody decided they wanted to do something,
Yeah.
you know,
So my only suggestion would be, if that's city property and is currently zoned residential, can we go back and review all city-owned properties and double check their zoning to make sure that they are zoned
that would probably
appropriately?
No.
Because that seems like kind of a wild
What kind of
thing
process would
oversight.
it be to
Great
rezone a
catch,
city-owned
Adam.
property?
So that's the second issue, the lot right behind the warehouse is the old city shop, and that's zoned residential.
Yeah.
And so that's our second, we would like to start, partnering with the city to see if that lot, along with the current warehouse lot, could be combined to do some strategic planning on how we could, expand the food bank structure down there.
So if it was zoned public, semi-public, they could do what they're talking about, right?
I'll need to double check the specific regulations. Certainly, you can do many more things in public, semi-public, but I would just want to make sure that everything you want to do could be allowed in that zone, or
Yes.
pick a different zone, or otherwise make some changes to make sure
maybe
that
you
could
could
be.
make a
Can I
list
make-
of the things you might want to do that we
Yeah.
can make
Yeah.
sure that they could be covered by
Yeah.
that.
And I would absolutely work with y'all to make sure that we stay within those parameters.
Sure.
The other flip side of all of this is that would open up that corner of GT4 for a multifamily.
Which one? Which corner?
Where the food bank's at.
Where it is now?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So you would move all of your operations to the warehouse property.
In your dream sequence, that's what would happen.
Yeah,
I know.
ideally. Okay.
Okay.
In the dream sequence, I really do not want to have to run from that corner to that corner 50 million times a day.
Sure, that
to
makes
move
sense.
food, or
Mhm.
to receive a truck.
Mhm.
Or, I mean, I don't have enough volunteers to be able to do that, so in a lot of ways, we've got somebody running back and forth continuously, instead of maybe going across an alley.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yay.
And having more space for parking when the clients come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays would be ideal, because that little parking lot where we're at now is just
It's
jammed.
pretty crazy when there's a lot
Yeah,
of people.
getting out onto the highway or coming in, I think it's Custer,
Real.
it gets pretty busy.
Mhm.
We actually have people lining up, and they go all the way down Custer to, Lincoln, and they sit there. And that's not being a good neighbor either. We do try and see if we can get them to make sure that they are not parked in the alleyway or in front of somebody's driveway. But again, we cannot police everybody or parent everybody on the planet.
Sure. Have you thought about the logistics of the warehouse spot and how people would get in and out
Yes,
better?
we have worked with that. We are also working with, within this strategic plan is working with, all of you. It's also working with an engineer, because we would like to expand that warehouse. So we did originally, we did go to Dan, and we did get some drawings done to put, 2 dry boxes in where the fence is, and then move the trucks someplace else. But that's just, this other the other plan, the new plan, is just going to be a lot better. We are gonna be able to house more food, and we can do it safely. Putting food in dry boxes, we have the issue of heat. You get a week of 90-degree weather here, inside one of those dry boxes, it's 200.
Mhm.
And then the food does not, canned food, if that's what you're gonna put in there, if you're gonna put non-food, cannot survive that.
Mhm.
And we need to be able to, as the community grows, we have to grow with the community, because if there's a catastrophic issue within this community, we can't take care of it. If you can't get yourself to Olympia because of some catastrophic something, and Dave's is down, we at least will have food for everybody within the within Tenino Common, to help you along.
No.
You may not like to have to eat beans for a week, but that is better than nothing.
True.
But if we don't have the room to plant it, to house it, it's not gonna happen.
Have you so you've talked to Dave Watterson also about
Yes.
additional help the city might be able to provide?
Yes, well, we have to talk to everybody.
Yeah.
So I have ripped off Pandora's box today.
Well, it sounds like a lot of your stuff could be part of like an emergency preparedness plan for the city,
Yes.
which maybe the city could, I don't know, I mean, I don't speak for the city, but the city has an engineer also, and
Yes,
I know if it was, part of a larger plan, maybe, I don't know.
I feel like, turn this on. I feel like maybe my colleague Reese, who's kind of leading the climate element, should maybe talk to you folks if he hasn't reached out already as well.
okay,
So
so,
I have my card,
okay,
and I would ask that you please email me. I'm working from home the next couple days, but please email me. Let's set up a call, and I can learn more about kind of what your long-term vision is for the property to make sure that we're making the right choice related to future land use designation and zoning designation.
yes, because we can't move, there is absolutely no moving forward without something happening down there. On your end.
It's definitely not a residential property.
Yeah.
So now I'm throwing that ball into your court.
Well, let me add something, since you
Yeah.
opened Pandora's box, I mean, we're super sensitive and aware of what it would be like moving the distribution on Tuesdays and Thursdays down to there, because you do have people living down there, and that's gonna be a change. And so there'd have to be a public process, obviously, to discuss that.
There is certainly a process to initiate this kind of amendment with the city, but I think at this point, since we're in the midst of our periodic update of the comp plan, provided you're okay with the city's timeline of adopting a plan by December 31st, 2025, we're in business.
So the land use change of the warehouse and city lot, or the zoning change could happen before that?
We could.
Might have been an error in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could look at some options depending on what your timing is.
Well, it kind of depends on, because we want to go after the grants, plan with commerce and so forth, and controlling tenure of the site is always an issue, and so we want to work with the city to make sure maybe we're partnering, the food bank and the city work together. Maybe we don't have to have it zoned, but the initial read is we do.
Okay.
To get the zoning change, to be eligible to go after other grants.
Maybe we could verify that it's real and not just.
Yeah, I'll take a look at the zoning map and the regulations and kind of I'll put together a summary of what I think the next steps should be to make some changes.
Wonderful, because that's, and that brings up the thing that you said, well, maybe we better look at the rest of them that the city owns, because I mean, I don't know. That's the only piece down there that I am interested in.
Yeah.
Except for where I live, and that's a whole different discussion on a later date.
So, can I ask a question really quick? The Commerce Grant,
Yes.
what's the award date on that? Do you
What's
know?
the application deadline?
Okay, application.
Yeah.
Okay, so there is a number of them. One, I just missed it,
Okay.
or I'm going to miss it because there is no way for me to write into that grant, that's due this month. Because these questions are being asked of us, and I was not prepared I needed to do a lot of other homework first. That warehouse down there has got a lot of skeletons in that closet.
Are you guys the only one using it now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, but it was a grant from that
Nice.
grant money from the county
Right.
paid for that, and the building is to only be used for emergency food housing. But again, we've now outgrown it. The community has grown since it was built in 08, I believe. And
So Jody, explain the Commerce Grant that we have
Okay.
executed
so
contract.
yes, we are in contract with a Commerce Grant right now. And part of that, by the end of November, we will have a contingency plan built. And this is a piece of it. We've gotten some other things with that went with that grant. And so I want to just continue down that path. So the next step with Commerce is to implement some of that. And I can't do that.
Gotcha.
Okay. So let's talk as soon as we reasonably can and figure out what next steps are. And then in terms of very pressing grant deadlines, I mean, at least the folks at Commerce that I work with for planning grants
Yes.
tend to be very understanding and flexible, and they might accept some kind of assurance from the city that we're resolving issues and intend to have them completed, by a date certain or something like that. And I could put together a letter or, something for the mayor to sign once,
Okay. So this
we can figure a way.
So I'm just learning how Washington Commerce and their grant system works, because all of the other grants that I've done have been USDA, WSDA, and each one of them is an animal all its own. It's crazy. Nobody's grants
I have not worked with Steve. I worked with, I work generally with folks in the planning department. And so I know there are a lot of different arms. But, you know, all of the folks that I've worked with have made it clear that Commerce's priority is to get money into the hands of jurisdictions or organizations that need to spend it. So with that in mind, they have been very flexible on a lot of things, and yeah.
And that is some very good information to know, because like I said, WSDA and USDA grants, no. This is your lane, and you need to stay in that lane, and this is your date, and we don't talk to you after that date. You don't exist. So this is good
We
information.
want to try to hit the deadline. I think it's next week, if we can get a letter.
Yeah, I mean, next week is really tight, but if we can get an understanding of exactly what you need, maybe even connect with the Commerce rep to see if this kind of like letter approach or whatever assurance approach could be acceptable.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to work on a solution to support that.
Because this is supporting the entire community. This is not just because we want something cool and pretty and awesome.
Yeah,
We want that too.
I mean,
This takes care of the community. And we, as our community also ages, and you're getting ready to rezone things with our aging community, it's going to impact them, financially. We have a ton of our seniors, which I call oldsters, because they call me, Jody, this is one of your oldsters, are running and trying to make ends meet for less than $1,000 a month within this community.
jeez, yeah.
And you may not know that, because they're not gonna tell you, but we have a lot of that.
One final thing, and we'll wrap up.
Yes. Sorry for taking-
How many people do
Oh,
we
no.
deliver to that can't get out of their house?
Right now we have, every other week we deliver to about 70 families, 70 households. 25 of those are every week because they can't get out. They don't have transportation at all. They've become elderly enough that they don't have that. We have them that are on chemo, or hospice, and they still need to eat just because they're on hospice, but they can't physically get someplace. And a lot of them are also technical savvy. They're not technical savvy, so ordering from Amazon is very difficult. We see that quite often too. They'll ask us, Jody, can you order this for me from Amazon and have it delivered and then bring it to me? I need it, but I don't know how to do this. And I do, because I do. But that is the things that we do. We don't have to do that, but we do that because this is somebody's grandma, somebody's great grandma that needs these kinds of things. So they all get fresh veggies. We have a grant right now that we are running on with WSDA. It's called We Feed Washington. And we're working on a $50,000, last $50,000 until July. And we purchase Washington grown and raised produce and other things, just for the community. And we go down to the farmer's market and purchase every week. So, anyway, but that's what goes in there too.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have one quick, this is the project, I think we should talk about that, but also,
You're Christina.
I'm Christina,
Right on.
my email's on the front.
Okay.
Don't call my office, I won't be
Yeah.
there the next 2 days, just email me, and then in addition
You
to.
getting married, I heard.
No,
Oh, that's you. Oh, sorry.
I'm already.
Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, thank you for coming out. Yeah, it's nice. Yes.
It was fascinating listening to you guys talk about this.
I'm so sorry, I have some thoughts.
Yeah, go for it.
So, as we look at that, I think we should also look at some of the surrounding properties in the aspect of potentially rezoning to multifamily. I think if we're going to have such a community resource on that corner, it would be very beneficial for there to be more access for some of those lower income or some of those single parent families or whatever might be that situation for them to have the opportunity to live close to the food bank for those kind of needs. I know there is I don't know that it's technically an apartment complex, but right there at the corner, and it looks like it's zoned
Like
single family at the
townhomes
moment.
or something like
Yeah.
that.
But looking at that opportunity to rezone for the benefit of the community surrounding that area, and just enhancing that. And then I think that will also, in the future, allow us to kind of be more competitive in a roundabout in that corner as well.
We already
That's a
have
good
an
idea.
apartment down on that corner.
Sorry, what?
Two houses.
Oh, yeah,
there,
yeah,
we have
yeah.
apartments already.
Yeah. But I think zoning it to multifamily will allow it to be shaped in some other
Yeah.
ways.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
That's all my thoughts.
Nice. Cool.
Okay.
All right, any more discussion? Anything else you want to talk about? Oh. Yes, please.
Speaking on the last subject, yeah, and I'm Jeff Isla, City Council, here as the liaison between the City Council and the Planning Commission. In hearing what you're speaking about, Jody, letter of intent, absolutely, I'm sure we can do that. I don't know if the mayor has the authority to do that on his own. If he does, that's great. If not, the City Council is 2 weeks out, 27th for our next meeting, and he can certainly put that on our agenda. The property you're talking about, the city just recently had it appraised. We're looking at some of the city's public properties that are excess, with an idea of maybe selling some of them to help with our budget shortfall. So that's something you may want to consider as you're putting together your,
That's
already working with them.
yeah, all of that has been on the agenda for quite a while.
Okay, all good then, all good. So yeah, if there's anything we can do in the city and the city council, please let us know. Yeah, what you do there is a great value to the Tenino and our surrounding communities. Thank you for that. And what the one question on your presentation in looking at the agenda before coming here, you know, there was the packet, preparatory material, and there was the application basically that you all discussed. Is it possible to have these presentations, the slideshows, available beforehand to review and kind of digest what's going to be coming up before we actually get it? And is this available? You've presented it in a public forum. Is that available online somewhere that it could be downloaded by interested citizens?
I'll answer this one. So Jeff, as I'm sure you know, I'm the Jen of Planning Commission. I
Yes.
create all the agendas. Will is our chairman. He is CC'd throughout the entire process, and he was aware, as most of the council is usually, or not council, Planning Commission is usually aware. There were some hindrances with this agenda, unfortunately. There were life instances that popped up. So that is why we did not have the extra attachments until today's meeting, but it's always available the following day.
Okay,
The
very good.
agenda's updated before I type up the meeting minutes, and then
Okay.
it's all recorded as
All
well.
right, all right, super, thank you. That was really all I had to say on that. Do I understand from the meeting that we're going with a county assessment of our housing needs now as the primary source?
Yes.
The regional planning council.
Yeah, and that's always been the plan, but because it has been so long coming to get final numbers, as you saw from their schedule, it's still not final until sometime this winter is when they're expecting to take formal action. We wanted to do some amount of calculation to inform planning discussions. We don't want to be starting our comp plan update in December, right? So Yes, it's always been the plan to go with TRPC's official adoption, or adopted allocations. And now we have kind of the dialed in scenarios that they're considering.
Okay, very good.
And we will be using whichever one they do take final action on.
And I agree with your comment that you said that it's not wasted time. Everything you've done is bringing issues to light and consideration, and some of these things just have to chew on and muddle through to what we're going to end up doing here. Anyway, I thank you all for your time putting it in towards the city. This is a great service to all of us. Hope to see you next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay. Any other announcements? No? Right, with that, I'm gonna adjourn the meeting.